Hello, and welcome to Media Assault, the podcast about movies, music, and video games. Visit us online at mediaassault.com or on Twitter at mediaassault. Hello, once again, this is Media Assault, and I'm your host, Sean Kazat. So since this is Music Week, I wanted to lead off with a feature that I've been wanting to do for a little while now, and that's highlighting an underrated or little-known band from the past that is really worth listening to or checking out. This week, I wanted to feature a band that is probably more known for being underrated and overlooked than they are for their music, and that's a shame. The band I'm referring to is also one of my favorite bands of all time, King's X. King's X have been around in some form or fashion since the late 1970s. First they were known as The Edge, and then they became Sneak Preview. In 1987, they secured a recording contract with Megaforce Records, once the home of Metallica, Anthrax, and Ace Frehley. And in 1988, Megaforce released Out of the Silent Planet. Now, I first came across King's X watching MTV's Headbangers Ball. Their video for King aired, and I was intrigued. They didn't sound like anything else I'd ever heard, especially on Headbangers Ball, which at that time was awash in bands like Motley Crue, Poison, and Guns N' Roses. No, my mind processed King's X by telling me they sounded like a cross between the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix, with a distinctive groove. Bassist Doug Pinnick had a mohawk and wore a military marching band jacket. Ty Tabor, the guitarist, looked like a heavy metal John Lennon, and drummer Jerry Gaskill wore round John Lennon-like sunglasses and beat the crap out of his drums. The video for King highlighted how different they were from the current look of the times, but I went right out and bought Out of the Silent Planet on cassette the next day. On my way home from the record store, I listened to the album. The first track, In the New Age, started off with a mystical-sounding intro and then dropped into a seriously heavy groove. The first words were, "Humanity is looking for itself, the ancient wisdom taken from the shelf." Yeah, this was seriously different from Welcome to the Jungle or Girls, Girls, Girls. The lyrics, which were alternately sung by Ty Tabor or Doug Pinnick, were tinged with religious imagery and soared over some damn catchy music. The bass was really heavy in the mix. I'm not a musician, and I can't describe it in musical terms, but there was just something about their sound that immediately made them stand out and above the other bands of the time. Then came the guitar solo. Ty Tabor blasts out a sick but concise shred fest before the song builds to a climax. Then the next song came on. The opening notes of Goldilocks, now one of my all-time favorite songs by the band. Immediately, the lyrics, which dealt with longing, love, and the desire to connect, just hit a chord with my then 20-year-old self. These guys were amazing, and I was only 2 songs into the album. Apparently, this song made a huge impression on other fans too, because when the band plays the song live now, they let the crowd sing the entire song in unison. And it doesn't come across as lazy, it just comes across as magical. But as I sat there and I listened to the rest of the album, I was struck by the fact that a lot of the songs dealt with depressing subjects, loneliness, misunderstanding, separation, but somehow they made me feel uplifted and in a better mood. The songs that weren't about those subjects were about love and wonder, and this wasn't the love, I'm doing air quotes, this wasn't love that the other bands of the time sang about that you'd find in the backseat of a car or in a dirty motel room, but this was love as a force that permeated all of us and could make things better. This was an album that opened my mind and my heart a little wider than any other band had ever done. I listened to this album over and over again, and I tried to find out as much about them as I could in a pre-internet world. I told everyone I knew about them. I probably sounded like a lunatic, and being that I was a person who was known for liking bands like the Vinnie Vincent Invasion and Kiss, not too many of my friends put too much worth into my saying that these guys were incredible or different enough to transcend the heavy metal that I typically listened to at the time. I didn't care. They were kind of my band, and I was okay with that too. I wanted desperately to see the band live. I'd get my chance soon enough. In 1989, the band released Gretchen Goes to Nebraska, the album that most consider to be their best album. They released a video for Over My Head that appeared on MTV and was in heavy rotation on Dial MTV, which was their afternoon request show, for about a month. That song further solidified their rock as gospel approach to music, but this time it was a literal gospel influence. Another video, for Summerland, was a simple, more direct video showing the band performing the song in a studio, in concert, and alternating with projected backdrops of a city skyline and an amusement park. At the end, the band walks into an animated version of their album cover. Gretchen Goes to Nebraska would become the album that I would return to whenever I was in a bad mood. It never failed, and still never fails, to make me feel better after listening to it. In November of 1989, I finally got my chance to see King's X live. They opened for Billy Squier, of all people. Blue Murder also appeared on the bill, and that was a band featuring John Sykes of Whitesnake and Thin Lizzy, Carmine Appice of Vanilla Fudge, and Tony Franklin from The Firm. Being that it was almost 30 years ago, I don't remember much about the concert other than King's X was amazing. Blue Murder was terrible. They were a great studio band, but they didn't translate live. And Billy Squier was okay. I'd finally seen them live, and I also saw that they didn't seem to catch on with this weird audience. Squier had lost his popularity after his Rock Me Tonight video, and the cross-billing with King's X, who weren't mainstream, and the Led Zeppelin-influenced Blue Murder seemed like a desperate attempt to connect to someone, anyone, who might enjoy his music. I remember seeing bikers at the show who had no idea what to make of King's X. One guy actually taunted me for buying a King's X t-shirt. Still, I was unfazed and so happy to have finally seen the band live. In 1990, the band released Faith, Hope, Love, and scored what would be their biggest radio or MTV hit of the time, It's Love. The album also contained We Are Finding Who We Are, I Can't Help It, and We Were Born to Be Loved. This was the first album of theirs that I started to feel like they were getting stuck in a rut creatively. The best songs are among their best of all time, but there's a little bit more filler on this album. The title cut is a prime example of this, and the lyrics tend to lean a little more into Christian themes. 1992 brought the self-titled King's X, which I remember listening to a lot in my car, but as of now, I can only remember a few songs from it. Black Flag, which was the lead-off single, Lost in Germany, and The World Around Me are the ones that stick in my mind. I also remember a random comment from my girlfriend at the time. They sound like David Bowie. I didn't see how she came to that conclusion. Maybe you can. Then the band took some time off. They split with their longtime manager and re-emerged in 1994 with Dogman. This was at the height of the grunge era. Supposedly, bands like Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam were crediting King's X as an influence. I had started listening to both of those bands a lot in King's X's absence from the scene. Fittingly, Dogman's first song, the title cut, shows that King's X was not done, not by a long shot. The production, which was now handled by Brendan O'Brien, who had produced Pearl Jam, showcased the deep groove of Doug Pinnick's bass and made the band sound fresh, re-energized, and maybe with a little chip on their shoulder. Success had seemed to pass King's X by, but bands that had taken elements of their signature sound were now some of the most popular bands in the world. Dogman is a darker album than their previous work, but it didn't feel like they drastically altered their sound to fit the sound of the day. I would say that the production highlighted their similarities to the bands of the time, but if anything, I got the feelings back that I felt when I listened to them for the first time. I fell in love with the band all over again. Dogman, Flies in Blue Skies, Cigarettes, Pillow, and Complain are all favorite tracks from the album that I still listen to today. They even covered Hendrix's Manic Depression for good measure, which is fitting since they initially reminded me of Hendrix the first time that I heard them. In 1996, they released their last major label album, Ear Candy. This album felt a little more melancholy than Dogman. Dogman was dark, but it wasn't depressing. Ear Candy wasn't depressing either, but rather it was sort of wistful and reflective. The opening track, The Train, features a chorus that goes, "Last time aboard the train that goes around the world," as if to say that they knew that this might be their last chance to achieve mainstream success. Like Dogman, there is not one filler track on the album. The Train, A Box, Looking for Love, Mississippi Moon, and Picture are some of my favorite tracks. The closer, Life Going By, sounds as if the band were reflecting on all they'd seen over the years. Not so much a goodbye, but sort of taking stock of where they've been and where they'd be going in the future. Where they'd go was to Metal Blade Records for a series of albums that were self-produced and a bit up and down. I actually didn't buy 1998's Tapehead until much later. I think I listened to it once all the way through, which was a rarity for me, as King's X albums had always been front-to-back kind of experiences. Still, Groove Machine, which remains the band's opening song in concert to this day, is a favorite of mine. But songs like the grating Walter Bella Farkas, which is probably meant to be a joke track, and Oh No missed the mark for me. 2000's Please Come Home, Mr. Bulbous was a bit more experimental. It still sounded like King's X, but they were making music that really didn't appeal to me at that time of my life. Things change, people change, times change. 2001 brought Manic Moonlight, and again, I didn't buy it when it first came out. But in 2002, I saw the band opening another odd show. My girlfriend at the time and I went to see Dio at the Odeon in Cleveland. Opening the show was Hammerfall, a power metal band, and before them, King's X. The venue was small, and the number of people at the show who appreciated the band was also quite small. So small, in fact, that I could walk right up to the stage, and there were maybe 3 or 4 other people near me. It was a huge contrast to how far away I felt sitting in the balcony of the Cleveland Music Hall the first time I saw them in 1989. I was literally standing directly in front of them in 2002, and they reminded me how amazing they were, playing their guts out in front of an audience that knew them as a footnote in rock history or who just didn't care who they were. They only played 6 songs, and 3 were from Faith, Hope, Love. 2 were from Manic Moonlight, and 1 was from Tapehead. But what I remember from that performance was Doug Pinnick absolutely blowing me away with a rendition of Static from Manic Moonlight. I'd never heard the song before. However, his vocals and his trademark wail reignited my interest in what the band was doing. I immediately bought the album. The album version of the track Static doesn't come close to the version they performed live, but it is still very good. Other tracks that caught my attention were False Alarm, Believe, and Vegetable. The album features a lot of drum loops, electronic percussion, and strange elements, but under all that studio trickery, the core sound is still there. 2003 saw the band revisit some of their oldest material and re-record it for an album called Black Like Sunday. It seemed to get the band to shake off their experimental vibe and dig down to their roots. While the material isn't as strong as their classic albums, it was great to hear the band stripped back to their true sound. In 2005, the band unleashed Ogre Tones. Much like Dogman signaled that the band wasn't done 11 years prior, Ogre Tones featured 12 amazing songs, plus a re-recording of Goldilocks from their first album, and Bam, which is a strange little experimental recording. The tour for the album saw the band playing every song from the album live, which is definitely a testament to how strong it was as a whole. I saw the band for a 3rd time at the Cleveland Agora Ballroom, and this was the first time I saw the band as a headliner, and I was treated to the core audience of the band, the true fans. And as great as it was to fully enjoy King's X for 2 hours playing a full set, it was a treat to experience the show with a crowd who knew every word to every song. That was truly amazing. In 2008, the band released what, at least for now, is their last studio album, 15. Named as such because it is their 15th album, including their live albums and compilations. Sticking with the same producer as Ogre Tones, Michael Wagner, who would work with Motley Crue, Accept, and Metallica, to name a few, the album retains the heaviness and clear production of its predecessor, and it too was on heavy rotation in my car's CD player for about a year. King's X have endured a lot over their history, being incorrectly labeled as a Christian rock band for a time, having some of the fans who thought they were a Christian band become angry when Doug Pinnick came out as gay in 1998. In fact, a distributor who supplied their music to Christian stores stopped carrying their music as a result. They've never achieved mainstream success despite so many successful bands claiming them as an influence or heaping praise on their musicianship. I can't claim to be their biggest fan of all time, but listening to their music as I prepared for this podcast made me realize that few other bands have been as influential in my life as King's X. Due to copyright concerns, I can't share their music on this podcast, but I can direct you to the show notes for this episode. So please visit mediaassault.buzzsprout.com and click on this episode for links to the songs that I've mentioned, as well as some videos of live broadcasts and interviews with the band. If I can turn one person on to King's X, I feel this episode has done its job. Next week is Games Week, and I look forward to having you as a listener. Feel free to drop me an email at sean@mediaassault.com. That's SEAN @media-assault.com. And you can also reach me on Twitter @mediaassault, one word. You can now listen to Media Assault on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and Stitcher. Media Assault is hosted on Buzzsprout. Thanks again for listening. Take it easy.